Pleased to have you join us for the Southeast Ocean and Coastal Acidification Network, or SOCAN, State-of-the-Art Science Webinar Series. The title of today's presentation is Modeling Ocean Acidification, Biogeochemistry Variability in the Southeast U.S. Coastal Ocean and Gulf of Mexico. The series is hosted by the Southeast Ocean and Coastal Acidification Network, and in short, these series lay a foundation for the state of the ocean acidification science in the southeastern region. And these webinars are really intended to create a dialogue among scientists to identify what we know, what we don't know, and what research in other regions can be applied to the U.S. or help us get a better understanding of what we need to be thinking about in terms of ocean acidifications and its potential impacts in the southeastern United States. With awareness of and access to the research and its applications and uses, webinar participants will be able to collaborate and better understand and adapt to ocean acidification moving forward here in this region. I'm Paula Keener. I am a marine biologist and director of NOAA's Ocean Exploration and Research Program, the education program within that. And I'm a member of the SOCAN Steering Committee, and I'll be facilitating today's session for you on behalf of the SOCAN Steering Committee. And joining me today is Jennifer Bennett-Mintz. Jen is the Education and Outreach Coordinator for NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program. And Jen is also going to be online helping to facilitate the questions that you will be able to ask both during the webinar and also after the webinar during the Q&A session. During today's presentation, all of you in the audience will be in a listen-only mode. You are welcome to type questions related to technical issues or questions for the presenter into the questions panel in the right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll be monitoring these and we'll respond to and post them to our speaker. We are also recording this session, and the video recording and a PDF of the presentation will be available on the SOCAN website shortly after the presentation. We are very fortunate today to have Dr. Ruoying He join us today, and he is a distinguished professor of oceanography in the Department of Marine, Earth, and Atmospheric Sciences at the North Carolina State University and an adjunct scientist at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Roy's research interests include coastal circulation dynamics, numerical modeling and data assimilation, biophysical interactions, and air-sea interactions. Roy's research team at North Carolina State uses in situ and remote sensing observations, numerical modeling analysis, and assimilation methods to examine fundamental ocean circulation physics and to gain an integrated understanding of their interactions with the atmosphere and with ocean biological, geological, and chemical processes. So Roy, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you at this point, and welcome.
Thank you, Paula. I just unmuted myself. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I think everyone
okay.
can hear me.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks again, Paula, for the introduction. And also, I want to thank the organizing committee for this opportunity to speak at SOCAN. Give me 1 second. To speak at the SOCAN seminar series. So as Paula mentioned, I am a physical oceanographer by training. Over years, I'm very fortunate to work with many colleagues on the couplings between ocean physics and ocean biogeochemical processes. So I want to start my presentation by acknowledging my colleagues and also all the funding agencies for their generous support. So when preparing my presentations, I went through some of the old SOCAN seminar presented in the last couple of months, and I was very much inspired by lots of high quality data. So this is a map showed by Ruoying He in his presentation. So very high resolution in situ measurements near Mississippi River Delta region. And this is another paper in Ruoying's group showing some high-resolution, high-quality observations in the South Atlantic Bight. And another talk by Scott Noakes showed point measurements. This is of Grace Reef's mooring time series, showing the variability of CO2 and also pH. So exciting data set to help us understand the variabilities. And early on, I think back in March, Rick showed this East Coast shelf-wide ship survey, also measuring the carbons, cycling, and CO2, etc. And I think 2 weeks ago, Libby talked about this ongoing ship survey, again, looking into the variabilities of the entire East Coast. So I think trying to get on the same themes. So the purpose of our modeling effort, so it's really trying to use a coupled system, modeling system, to do ocean state estimation. So no matter how hard we try to measure the ocean, we're still having lots of temporal and spatial gaps in our data. So one of the goals to use ocean models is to provide the time and space continuous ocean state information so we can fill the gaps. And also to use ocean models to elucidate the underlying physical and biogeochemical dynamics that determines the variabilities and also the long-term trend in our coastal marine ecosystem. So that's the overarching goal. And the outline of my presentation, so I'm going to introduce two coupled modeling systems we developed over the years for our regions. So one is a smaller domain for the South Atlantic Bight and the Gulf of Mexico. So the model resolution, spatial resolution is about 5 kilometers. And the second system I will briefly mention is for a larger Northwest Atlantic Ocean, coastal ocean. The spatial resolution is about 7 kilometers. So I want to draw your attention to this map. This is a map from a paper published by Schmitz 2013, and essentially shows our region of focus is part of the western boundary current system. So there's a very strong circulation moving from south to north. If you think about the water volume, about 45% of water mass actually coming from the southern hemisphere. The other 55% are the recirculation gyre of this North Atlantic circulation pattern. So the key point is, in addition to the strong local forcing, we also need to consider the larger scale circulation, transport, and also the climate variabilities in order to understand ocean circulation and also biogeochemical processes in our backyard. So I will also talk about some of my thoughts about what's going to be the path forward, how we can work together to help us understand our marine ecosystem, the ocean acidification dynamics better. And I will conclude with one slide of summary. Okay, so let's go with the first modeling system we have developed for the South Atlantic Bight and Gulf of Mexico. So this is a model domain showing the model simulated sea surface temperature in color. What you are seeing here, this is a model handcast solution of ocean temperature in 2004 March timeframe. And so this model covers the entire Gulf of Mexico, South Atlantic Bight. And as I mentioned, it's a 5-kilometer spatial resolution, and we have 36 vertical layers to resolve the water column information. So the open boundary, we're taking the information from the global HICOM model, and we're using INSET North America regional reanalysis as the surface forcing. We also consider the tidal forcing at the boundaries and using turbulence closures. So the model gives you a pretty realistic circulation handcast for our region for physics. And we then couple the physics with a biogeochemical models. This is developed by Kajat and others. And this figure here, this is taken from Elaine Hoffman's review article showing the conceptual structures of these biogeochemical models. So essentially, we need to simulate both the nitrogen cycle in the water columns and also the carbon cycles in the water columns. And the carbon cycle has both the air sea flux, that's the PCO2 components, and also the other carbon cycling compartments throughout the entire water column, as well as at the ocean bottom in the sediment layers. So this is one ski diagram. The other way to look at it is the same model, but combine both the carbon flow and the nitrogen flow together. Okay, so the blue compartments, that's all the carbon compartments, and the yellow parts are all the nitrogen processes. So you can look at the different lines. So the dashed line here, that's the influx, and the solid line here, that's the carbon flux. So this is a simple marine ecosystem model that can be used to describe what's going on for the carbon and nitrogen cycle, and also some lower tropical level marine ecosystem dynamics. So this is model we're coupling with our physical model, with the goal to, not only we try to simulate the physical states, but now we're also able to simulate the carbon nitrogen cycling, as well as some lower tropical level marine ecosystem dynamics. So the details of this model setup is documented in this paper published in 2013 in Biogeosciences. And for the initial and open boundary conditions, and this is a very important element for any regional models, we need to come up with some decent initial condition and also boundary conditions. So in this case, we're using Lavater's climatology for nitrate, and also using some historical data for alkalinity, LDIC. These are inorganic carbons. We pay lots of attention to local river forcing. So in this case, we consider 38 U.S. river. USGS provide some real-time observations for freshwater runoff, nitrate, ammonia, alkalinity, and based on alkalinity, you can also derive these are inorganic carbons. And we also have some other rivers, not inside the U.S., so especially some rivers from Mexico and also Cuba. For them, we do not have real-time data. Instead, we go back to literature, find the climatological information. Okay, so using this couple modeling system, we have done a 7 years model handcast. Okay, so a couple physical biogeochemical handcast for 7 years, and the model output include the nitrate, the ammonia, some primer productions, the chlorophyll concentrations, the phytoplankton, zooplankton concentrations, the total inorganic carbon, alkalinity, PCO2. From that, we can also compute the air sea flux and then oxygen. Okay, so I'm going to quickly show you some model solutions, but the details is described in this paper in Biogeosciences. Okay, so to begin with, I want to show you some comparisons. So lots of people use ocean color imagery to look at the chlorophyll concentration. So this is the monthly MODIS, satellite MODIS observed the surface chlorophyll concentration. And on the left, this is model simulated the chlorophyll concentration. Okay, so we see that the model is able to capture most of the variabilities, both in time and space. And there's very rich process and very rich scales in our backyard, both in the Gulf of Mexico and South Atlantic. And also the model is able to capture the majority of variability, which is quite encouraging. And this is another animation. I'm hoping that the network speed is fast enough to support the animation. But what's showing here, this is a more complete model product. So the upper left corner here shows a model simulated the ocean sea level in color shading and surface vectors. That's very strong currents. You can see this is loop current coming into the Gulf of Mexico, and then the currents move out of the Gulf, forming this the Gulf Stream, and then move out of South Atlantic Bight. Okay, and then the middle panel here shows model simulated surface salinity, and currently we have a very strong influence coming from Mississippi River. So low salinity water, buoyant plume coming out of the river mouth. This one shows sea surface temperature. Down here shows surface concentration of nitrate, and this is surface concentration of chlorophyll, and then showing here, this is surface concentration of inorganic carbons. So one thing we need to do is to validate model solution. So I showed you the comparison between model and observed surface chlorophyll. We also have observation coming from other regional observing platforms. So this is one example showing sea level comparisons. We have done this along about the 30-some coastal sea levels along our coast. And the model shows we have a pretty decent sea level comparison. And then spatially, we can compare the model simulated sea level variability with satellite sea surface height of ASO, for instance. And we can look at the sea level height and also using sea surface height to look at the eddy kinetic energy. So that's the comparison we can do. So in the Gulf, especially in the northern Gulf, there's lots of effort to take in situ measurements for physical variables and also biogeochemical variables. So this is a collective effort from LOMCON, EPA, Mississippi Consortia, and also NOAA Fishery CMAP survey. So we have this opportunity to compare with a lot of station observations. To do that, because the model is 5 kilometers and the station measurement is pretty sparse, and it's not easy to do point-by-point comparison. So we took approach used by Kaja Fano in his paper, and essentially we beam all the observations into 3 different sub-regions. So there's the delta, near field delta region, there's the intermediate river plume region, and then there's the far field regions. So what we did, and also this is what Kaja did, is to beam these observations into each of the 3 subregions, and then we do the same thing for the model solution, and then we make comparisons for each of the 3 subregions. So this is a comparison. So we first look at surface salinity. So this is from east to west. This is the near field delta region, intermediate river plume region, and then far field region. Okay, so then the time series shown by the blue curves, this is model simulation, and the red dots with the color bar, with the arrow bar, that's the observation. Okay, so this is a series observation spans over a number of years from, say, January 2005 all the way to summer 2010. So we see the model is able to resolve this intraannual variability in both sea surface salinity and also both the seasonal cycle and the intraannual cycles variabilities in sea surface temperature. So that's again on the physical side, and we can do similar comparison for the nitrate and then chlorophyll. Observation again are shown by the red dots, and along with the arrow bars, and model simulations are shown by the blue solid lines. So this give us some confidence about how well the model is able to capture the variability, the intrinsic variability observed by the ship surveys. And we see that model is again able to capture lots of variability. And what we can do next is to use this time and space continuous model solutions to do further diagnostic about the nitrogen cycling, the transport, and also the carbon transport. So this is one figure taken from the 2013 biogeosciences paper. in which we look at the seasonal mean of the longshore and cross-shore transport of the dissolved inorganic nitrogen and the particular organic nitrogen. So essentially, we can put some numbers about how much transport for each of the shelf components. There's different vectors indicates the ocean contribution, ocean transport contribution, moving the flux, nitrogen flux. And again, we see very clearly seasonal evolutions and also the contributions made by the currents. I won't go to the detail. This is another conclusion we document in the paper, and essentially put on the numbers. So suppose you have the shelf input, the river input from the local rivers, and then we can partition different distributions. So one of the major conclusions we find is the denitrification process was able to remove about 80% of river input of dissolved inorganic nitrogen. And then there's also offshore components, the circulation moving the nitrate input from the river to the deep ocean, which counts for about 17%. Okay, so again, this just is trying to show once you have the model solution, this is a type of the budget analysis you can do. So moving to the carbon. So as I mentioned, carbon cycling is part of this couple of biogeochemical models. So we can look into the seasonal distributions about PCO2. So this is season by season, spring, summer, and autumn and winter. And this is model simulated delta PCO2. So we are in the process of comparing this model simulation with lots of in situ PCO2 measurements that Letitia and Rick Cunningham and other people's USGS, other scientists are collecting and analyzing. So we're trying to, again, based on this model, handcast solutions to understand what's going on. So what's determined the seasonal evolution, what type of physical and biochemical processes causing such variability. So this is an ongoing study. We'll provide more information as the paper got published. So the other things we're working on is really trying to make this system become a user-friendly tool for other scientists, stakeholder community to take a look on daily basis. So we set up this website. So this is one of our websites showing the daily nowcast forecast of this SAPCA model we're running. So this is the georeferenced. So all the model solutions are visualized in this Google Earth framework. Again, the ocean color, the shading, the color shading here shows sea surface height, and the black vectors here are surface velocity, and the purple vector here are surface wind. Okay, so you can go through different links, examine the ocean condition, and you can also go through different depths. So not only at you can see the ocean condition on the surface, you can also visualize on other conditions at different levels. There's other online user-defined functions on this website. So you can use your mouse essentially to define a so-called virtual mooring. So if this is happen to be the location you want to look at subsurface condition, you can simply use your mouse to draw a bloom. And then there's online functionality will provide this vertical profile of temperature and salinity for you. You can, the other things you can do is to do a virtual transect. So again, use your mouse to draw two blooms. You form a transect, and then our website will be able to provide you with subsurface temperature, salinity, and also velocity. We're also going to include some biogeochemical state variables in the plot as well. So in the future, you should also be able to see the vertical distributions about nitrate and also chlorophyll, phytoplankton, etc. The third online function, which we got lots of requests, is essentially to do a virtual trajectories. So in this case, this is user-defined. So you as a user, you can use your mouse to pinpoint the location. Again, the bloom is the location you can define of the virtual particles you are going to release. So if you define the part image location, and then this online functionality will able to show you a 84 hours surface trajectories. This is predicted particle trajectories for you. So this is quite useful functionality to allow you to visualize the ocean transport. So in this case, we know there's very strong Florida currents, the Gulf Stream, so the particles tends to move much more faster than some of the particles released on the shelf. Okay, so again, give you a sense about how the ocean is moving ocean materials in our region. So on this website, we also put lots of effort doing the online skill assessment, and this is utilize lots of real-time data stream coming from Sakura, from IOS, and also from GCUS. And this is one example showing comparison between our model simulated and high-frequency radar observed surface velocity. So at each of the blocks, so 6 blocks here, we have some surface current measurements from each of radar. And then on the website, we will provide side-by-side the observed and the model simulated surface velocity comparison, okay, for each of the 6 HRF radar sites. So this can be visualized on the fly on a daily basis. Similarly, we can do this model comparison against the NOAA ocean surface. This is a tide gauge data. So you can, at each of the tide gauge station, you can look at model simulated sea level, compare that with the tide gauge observed sea level in blue. Okay, so going back to the carbon problem. And so Rick mentioned back in March about the global carbon projections into the future. And so far, lots of conclusion was made based on, the global scale IPCC model. So as we know, the global model is very coarse. So it's 1 degree or even 2 degree resolution. So sometimes it's very hard to put the global projection information into perspective at regional scale. So one thing we're trying to do, in addition to make some handcast and short-term forecast, is to use this couple modeling system to look at the regional climate scenarios for the past and also present and also into the future. So this is a collaborative effort. The methodology is essentially to couple our regional ocean model with a land surface model. So this is the land model developed by Auburn University. So the idea is, the land model will be able to provide you the freshwater runoff, the carbons, the nitrogen from the river. And then the ocean model will take over. Again, the ocean model, I should mention, is a coupled physical biogeochemical ocean model. That will be able to model the water column, biogeochemical cycling, the exchange between the shelf and deep ocean, as well as the air-sea exchange. Okay, by having this coupled land-ocean system, we can start to assessing the impact of climate and land use change on the terrestrial and ocean flux on carbon, nitrogen, and their cyclings in our backyard, in our marine ecosystem. And so we're in the process of working on this project. So we have done some 10-year, the present 10 years handcast, and we have been working on the past. So this is 1900 to 1950. So last 50 years handcast. And then what we'll be doing next is to run some future trajectories, future projections. So we can look into what's going to happen, say, in 2050 to 2100, the next 50 years. The idea is we can use this regional couple system, downscale all the IPCC climate model projections, so we can look into our regional scale processes, regional impact of climate change. So this is ongoing effort. It's a NASA project. We're working with UMass, Dartmouth, Alvin University, University of Delaware, and looking forward to the opportunity to report this effort in the future once the project is completed. Going back to Rick's, I referred lots of to the previous SOCON talks. So Rick mentioned this is a GeoMac survey from 2007 to 2012. Okay, so this is chip-based measurements, and in his talk, Rick mentioned that there's very significant spatial variability both in the salinity and temperature, as well as in PCO2 and saturation. So not just our region in the South Atlantic Bight and Gulf of Mexico, there's also lots of things going on in the Mid-Atlantic Bight and also Gulf of Maine. So then I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to look at larger spatial contexts. So that's why we, in the last couple of years, we have been building, implementing a larger scale models which covers the entire Northwest Atlantic Oceans. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly go through some information about the 7-kilometer Northwest Atlantic coastal ocean models. So this is model domain. Okay, so we cover the entire Northwest Atlantic Oceans. So we only have one open boundary now. So this open boundary linking Nova Scotia all the way to Venezuela. And again, given the importance of terrestrial input, the fresh river input, we put lots of efforts trying to quantify the river contributions. So in this model, we actually consider 196 river input in our region. The other element we spend lots of effort on is to really make this model become a fully coupled system. So in addition to the ocean circulation, now we also consider the forcing from atmosphere, the WRF model. So we build a regional WRF model, and we also have a regional surface wave model. And each of the 3 different models will transfer information. So it's a fully coupled system. So for instance, the ocean model will be providing the sea surface temperature map to the WRF model, and the regional WRF model in return will provide surface wind stress and also net surface heat flux. And similarly, the coupling is being implemented between the wave and circulation and wave with the WRF. Okay, so we're looking into a very sophisticated coupling between 3 different medias. As we know, the boundary layer dynamics is a key when we try to quantify the ERC flux. So we're trying to do a better job by adding the most sophisticated coupling. So what's being doing now is we're running 3 models simultaneously, and every 10 minutes, the 3 models passing the critical information among them, and then together we have a fully coupled system. And then within the ocean model, we still have the marine ecosystem coupling and also sediment transport coupling. So then we're trying to provide a fairly realistic marine environmental prediction system that can allow us to look into physical processes and also biogeochemical processes over the entire Northwest Atlantic coastal ocean. So this is just an example showing some of the model product, a snapshot. This is a coupled WRF model simulated sea level pressure on 2013 September 29th. So we have a low pressure system, as you can see, and then this is corresponding sea surface wave height, significant wave height, and the wave directions shown by the vectors. So you have a very strong low pressure system, stronger wind. In turn, you have a strong significant wave height. And this is corresponding sea surface velocity. This is from the ocean model. And along with the surface currents, you also have model simulated surface temperature and sea surface salinity. I should also mention this 10-meter wind surface map is also from the coupled WRF model. So work model produce sea level pressure, wind, the wave model producing the wave information, and the ocean model provide currents, temperature, salinity, etc. Everything is at 7-kilometer resolution. Okay, so the next step we're working on right now is to couple again this biogeochemical model with this Northwest Atlantic coastal ocean model, so we can start addressing the spatial difference over different time scales. So this is an ongoing effort, and as we have more results, we'll be sharing with the colleagues on the phone. Okay, so this is again taken from Rick's talk, so showing if you look at the carbon budgets and the saturation, there's lots of input driven by the ocean circulation variability and also water mass. So Rick showed that in 2007 and 2012, there is a different ocean circulation pattern. There's strong loop current conditions versus weak loop current conditions in 2012. And up in the north, there's intrusion from Labrador Sea. So different internal variability in circulation transport has very large impact on the local distributions of saturations, the carbon cyclone. So this is something we're trying to do using this coupled larger scale model. So eventually we're trying to elucidate the internal variability introduced by either the circulation dynamics or the air sea flux dynamics or the deep sea and shelf circulation interactions. So I think once the model is fully implemented, we will be at a position to quantify the relative contributions of each different processes. I want to highlight the importance of some subsurface measurements because as you've seen from Rick's talk, the contribution from different water mass, different circulation require us to not only look at surface condition, we also need to look at the subsurface condition. So that's why in the last few years, our team has been, we've been spending lots of efforts to collecting the subsurface measurements, water mass conditions using gliders. So this is all South Atlantic Bight. So this is all North Carolina. So we've been running a glider transect, measuring the subsurface temperature conditions, salinity, and the density. So this is a 2011 transect collection made by our glider Salacia, and this is a March 2012 glider survey over the entire South Atlantic Bight. And this is another survey we did back in 2013. And this is last year working with a colleague at USF and NOAA Fisheries Science Center. So we did another glider survey essentially along the Gulf streams. Okay, so essentially you can see different water mass evolutions between the shelf water and Gulf stream water and their stratification condition. So I think this is very critical information we need to assimilate into the model so we can have a better skill to resolve the evolutions of water mass and circulation so we can do a better predictions about the transport and transport impact on the carbon and nitrogen cycle. We also been utilizing lots of remote sensing observations. So look at the sea surface temperature and the ocean color information. I know some of our colleagues, they're using the remote sensing data to derive the PCO2, the carbon flux. So there's an empirical model you can derive based on the long-term temperature and ocean color measurements. One of the major problems, though, for our region is because we have a very strong Gulf Stream warm water passing through our region, so we have a very strong convection. So typically, we have lots of clouds in our region. If you look at typical remote sensing image, you essentially have the gappy data, right? So you have no information for temperature, for instance, due to the clouds. And similarly for ocean cloud view information. So you only have a small region on each particular day, right? You do not have a cloud-free image for the entire region. So one thing we have done, and that has been documented by a number of publications, is to come up with a EUF-based methodology. So we can remove all the clouds. We can come up with a daily cloud-free SST and also ocean color reconstruction or reanalysis for the last 11 years. So we have this cloud-free SST and chlorophyll information starting from 2003 all the way to 2013. And we have done similar analysis for the Gulf of Mexico. So again, on a typical day, this is what you see. It's a cloud-covered SST, cloud-covered chlorophyll image, and by using the same methodology, we can come up with a cloud-free SST and chlorophyll for the entire Gulf. So for both Southern Divide and Gulf of Mexico, we have 11 years daily cloud-free time series we can use to look into the couple physical, biophysical dynamics, and also potentially work with colleagues to look into the derived carbon flux estimate using the remote sensing data. So just some thoughts about path forward. I think we're talking about the global, our backyard, the global ocean, the coast ocean response to climate change. We need to first understand some intrinsic variabilities about our coast ocean. So their response at synoptic, seasonal, and interannual timescales. So we need to have a better understanding about that. And secondly, we need to realize there's a very strong coupling in the land-ocean atmospheres, and also very strong coupling among physics, biology, and geology in coast oceans. So we need to quantify all these couplings and the linkages using observation and numerical models. And I just quickly went through this point that I think there's lots of potential. So once we have a regional couple biophysical, biogeochemical models, then we can start nest these regional models inside the global IPCC model. So we can provide a better regional projections to show how the climate impact will influence the ocean acidifications, the marine ecosystem dynamics in the Southeast U.S. coast oceans. And the final point I want to say is we're still a long way to our final goal, because the deterministic predictions about the coast ocean circulation and the biogeochemical processes still require us to work as a community to improve the model, refine the models, to build advanced ocean observing infrastructures. And also we need to develop a robust data simulation methodologies so we can combine observation with model together to help us do a better ocean state estimations. So to summarize my presentations, so far, so we've been working on this couple of physical and biogeochemical modelings, working on both in the handcast modes and also nowcast, fullcast mode. So for both Gulf of Mexico and Southern Divide, and also we started working on these larger Northwest Atlantic coastal oceans. So far, both models provide the three-dimensional clinic ocean circulation information. So we have temperature, salinity, velocity, sea level informations. By using the couple system, we also have the wave information, significant wave height and wave directions, regional marine meteorology information, the 10-meter wind, sea level pressure, air temperature, etc. And also we have the time and space continuous information, model simulations for nitrate, ammonia, phytoplankton, zooplankton concentration, total inorganic carbon, alkalinity, PCO2, and oxygens. And we do have some handcast solution available online. So if any of the colleagues wants to have access to our digital output, that can be arranged. We're also developing some value-added product, such as online model skill assessment. There's online user-defined functionality for virtual mooring, virtual transect, and virtual drift trajectory simulations. We've been working on model ensembles. So I know there's a number of research group and also national lab are building a global scale model and regional scale model. So I think model ensemble has lots of potential. And as I mentioned, data simulation is the key to link observation with the models. Eventually, we're hoping to start building some seasonal forecast and some regional downscaling of climate scenarios. In terms of observations, The glider-based subsurface hydrography measurements is extremely important to resolve the evolutions of water mass and along-shelf and cross-shelf transport. And finally, this cloud-free remote sensing analysis provide potential to use remote sensing data to study the ERC flux. So eventually, we're hoping that this marine ecosystem modeling system, both the South-Down and the Northwest Atlantic Ocean model, can be used to predict ocean acidification for our East Coast, for our backyard. And we can also use the model system to support fishery, the coral habitat, species distribution problem, look into hypoxia, which is a key problem for Mississippi River Delta, and also harmful algal blooms. So I provide some web links. So this is our group research website, and this is South-Down modeling website, and this is the Northwest Atlantic modeling website. I also put my contact information right here. So with that, I will stop, and I'll be happy to answer any questions the audience might have. Thank you.
Roy, thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. Wow, it's just amazing what your group is doing with all this modeling. So yeah, we'd like to open the floor to questions right now. We do have a couple of questions that have already been posted, and so I'd encourage the audience to continue to submit questions to the question box. One question, there's a couple of questions from the Office of Ocean Acidification, or the Ocean Acidification Program within NOAA. And Dwight Gledhill is asking if the repeated geochemical surveys, like through GOMAC and ECOA, and observing assets like Grace Reef, are those properly optimized in terms of the spatial and temporal resolution, depth, and measured parameters to best suit your modeling requirements?
So let me see if I understand the question correctly. So are you asking whether the observation design is best optimized?
Yeah, for example, are you getting the best data that you need for your models,
right,
from the NOAA assets that are out there, or do we need to better optimize the parameters that you're getting from the NOAA assets for your models?
Oh, I see. I think at the moment we're using whatever observations we have from our colleagues from NOAA labs. So essentially, we're using that information for model validations purpose. So that's the first step. So we're trying to see whether the model is able to capture all the variability measured by ship, measured by the buoys. And once as this is evolving process, so once we, are satisfied with the model performance, we're hoping to be able to provide some feedback. So using the model predictions to provide some guidance about where to deploy our observation assets. So there's some strategic location maybe that we can pinpoint on the map. So this is location we want to take more PCO2 measurements, the nutrient measurements. So we're hoping to build up that feedback loop. So not only to just use observation for validation purpose, but also using the model to help with the array design, the observation planning effort.
Right. Okay. And I guess sort of to drill down a little bit further, are you getting your refined measurements? Are you getting the measurements that I guess better refined measurements would make your models more predictable, correct?
Yes. Yes. So yes, absolutely. So so far, I think we're still very much limited by the observations data we have. We can put our hands on. Most of the observations I mentioned today are located in the northern Gulf around the Mississippi River Delta. We start to have some observations working with Rick on the hand and also Letitia. So we're looking into the Gulf-wide the PCO2 distribution as a model validation step. So we are looking into the observations taken from the ship survey, ongoing GeoMac ship surveys for the East Coast. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so lots of validation purpose. So we're trying to see how the model performs and as a way to further improve the model, but eventually we're hoping to use the model to fill the gaps and look into the dynamics and finally feedback to the model design, observational design.
Okay, thank you. And are there other federal or state agencies with whom we should be coordinating to ensure that the land-based measures are being obtained to better constrain the land-ocean interaction need to inform the models?
Right. I think EPA is crucial. USGS, lots of observation, again, for the validation point of view, EPA and USGS, they have in situ measurements that can be used to validate the land surface model, which provide us confidence to use this land surface model output to drive the marine ecosystem model. So I think NOAA, EPA, USGS, and maybe USDA as well. So we need to do more to outreach, to talk to scientists in other research lab agencies so we can have a better coordination and sharing the information learned in this effort.
So you're looking at runoff, carbon, nitrogen from the land-based sources. Are there other parameters that you're looking at?
So far, just what's being listed here. So DIC, total carbon and total nitrogen and freshwater runoff. So that's essentially all the input variables we're taking from the land surface model. But that can be further enhanced to include other components.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions at this point from the audience? Okay, I'm not seeing any right this moment, but we have a few more minutes, and so I'll ask one. Roy, when you're looking at major gaps, and I know that that's what your models are, where you're developing these models to help inform where the data gaps are, but as you look within the Southeast region or the SOCAN region, if you were to look at from your perspective at critical areas for where we need data or could use data, what would you recommend that we be looking at in terms of needing data for this region, for the SOCAN region?
Right. For SOCAN region, I think the synoptic ship survey is very important because that gives you a spatial-wide coverage. But I would argue that if we want to look at the long-term variability, we do need to have some fixed location time series measurements. So I think so far we have a degree reef mooring, which is beautiful data sets, right? So I think Scott shows this time series. Tremendous efforts being put into this. Right. It would be nice to have a few other sites so we can start looking to the temporal variability and we can look into the trend. So I think that both the ship survey, spatial survey, and more point measurements, time series measurements will be extremely valuable for our effort.
Could you go back to that previous slide that you just had before you flip to this one, please?
This one? Yeah.
So if you look at the transects, you've got the one off North Carolina, you've got Gray's Reef, and then it looks like almost all of South Carolina, there's not much along South Carolina. For the transects, what would you recommend in terms of informing the location of that transect? Do you look at volume of river runoff? I mean, what are some of the parameters that you or variables that you consider when deciding where to locate a transect to best inform the gap?
So there's a big gap area in this region. So yeah, so I think if you want to focus on the we do have a very large sound system, chemical sound here. So there's lots of fresh water runoff and also the shelf and estuary interaction here. So this is one of the major carbon and nitrogen source. So I think one nice thing to have is to have some observing network in this region. And then moving south, so at the border area between the North Carolina and South Carolina, so the shelf is getting a bit wider. So you can see that Down in the south, this is very narrow, and then here it's become a bit wider. There's a lot of strong exchange. So we have a Gulf Stream passing by, and Gulf Stream has lots of instability moving onshore and offshore quite frequently. So if you want to talk about the shelf-wide carbon and nitrate budgets, we need to better quantify the location, the dynamics of the Gulf Stream. So having some routine measurements about water mass along these transects, so you can better define the motions of the Gulf Stream, will be quite nicely, will be very useful. Doing this by ship is quite expensive, so that's why I mentioned in the later part of my presentation, we can start using gliders, both slow climb glider or the wave gliders, right? So people have already put the pH sensors on wave gliders. That provide a very cost-effective way to measure the surface air-sea flux and also subsurface water mass condition. So I'm thinking by having, say, seasonal ship survey, a monthly glider transects, and along with some point-wise time series measurements, will start to provide the database help us understand this very complex physical and biogeochemical coupling process in our region.
But that kind of data you could immediately integrate into your models, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So that kind of data can be assimilated into the model to improve the model scale, and also working together with modern data, we can provide a better understanding about what's going on, both at the surface and also subsurface.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Roy, for, again, this excellent presentation. And so what I would like to do at this point is if any of the attendees think of any questions that they would like to pose to Roy, if you will just go ahead and email those to us at SOCAN, we'll be happy to get them to Roy, or you got his email address, and you can send them to him at that address, and we'll be happy to take care of that. So as I mentioned during the presentation, this presentation has been archived, and you will get a copy of that if you would like by going onto the Socorro website. Roy, I'd like to thank you again for this excellent presentation. So really, thanks. It was quite informative.
Thanks, Paula.
Absolutely.
And thanks everyone for your time and attention.
Thank you. So also, if you want to stay up to date on SOCAN happenings, you can see the SOCAN website on the bottom of the slide that's presented here. If you have any questions, just email us at the SOCAN@socorro.org website with thoughts about the webinar series. And our next webinar, we're going to change things up just a bit by doing some online panels for you, and we're going to be exploring the perception of ocean acidification as it relates to fisheries in the Southeast, and we're going to hear the perspective of experts representing science, industry, and the natural resource management sectors. And the first panel is going to focus on these perspectives from North Carolina and South Carolina. And then the following panel, which will be offered through the webinar series, will focus on these perspectives from Georgia and Florida. And so we hope that you'll be able to join these webinars. There will be the opportunity for you to submit questions and answers to the panelists during the panel, just as you have through the webinar series to date. And we hope that you'll be able to participate. And so the times of the panels will be posted on the SOCAN webinar website very soon, so please check back with us. And thanks again to Roy for this very informative presentation, and to all of you for your thoughtful questions and for taking time to join us.